What's up, guys? RedRaven here. Um, I got requested to do a tutorial on how I make my bass lines for the actual songs I use. So I'm going to try to cover that. What I do when I produce is I usually, if I'm making like a dubstep or drum and bass song, I'll make my bass line first. That way I can make my drums and everything else fit with what's essentially the main part of your song. Um, so what I do is I open up Blue. I set it to a blank preset just by hitting clear or loading up the blank bank by scrolling through your banks with these buttons. And so I just load up a square wave ratio 50% so it turns it down an octave. And then I make a simple bass line, which I've already done. And I've got some just basic drums here with it so you can hear how it sounds. Now those drums are pretty weak, and the bass is pretty weak. But you start getting an idea of how your track is going to sound early on, or at least I do doing it this way. With your bass and your drums, you kind of get a feel for how when there's going to be gaps in the beat, for effect, and when there's going to be big hits and whatnot. So I'll load up some basic drums and a square wave, and I'm ready to go. And I'll make a basic melody, and then I'll take it from there. So what I'll do is I'll just mute the drums for now, and I'll go back into Blue here. Alright, so how can we make this bass stand out? How can we make it sound big and still stay mostly in mono? You got to remember that, because if you start getting into a lot of stereo stuff, a lot of club systems are mono, so you want your bass and probably a lot of the mids on your bass should probably be mono. When you get to the higher treble stuff, it doesn't matter quite as much, but the bass you want mono. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use frequency modulation, or FM synthesis it's usually called, and make a really metallic sound, because they're pretty popular right now, and I've used a couple in my last few songs, so I'll show you how I go about doing that. First things first is we're going to need to set a better algorithm if you're using Blue. So I usually pick this one, number 13. It's pretty straightforward. Oscillator A modulates oscillator B. Oscillator C modulates E, and oscillator D modulates oscillator F. That's kind of hard to say. So what I'll do is I'll start over here with B, and then I'll find a really nice sound. I've been using Spectral 31 quite a bit because it's got a lot of harmonics to it. Okay, so then I'll turn oscillator A back on and cycle through until I find a nice sound that works well. And I'm actually going to go to spectral waves for this. And Spectral 3 works well. And remember, oscillator A, which is Spectral 3, is down an octave from B. So what I'll do is I'll go to my mod matrix and I'll set free LFO A to control oscillator A volume. Now what that'll do is you saw me messing with the volume knob and how it was changing the sound. So now we're going to have an LFO do that. So I'll drag the amount up to about 50% here. Go to free LFOA, turn the sync on, and just set it to something like 1/4 or 1/8 for now. So you start here to hear how heavy the sound you can get just with a few simple things. So then I'll turn oscillator B off, and then I'll go over to oscillator F, and D modulates F in this algorithm. So I'll turn them both down to 0.5, and this will give me the bass of my patch. So I'll turn oscillator F on, and I'll find a nice simple wave. I'm going to use octave, and then I'll turn oscillator D on and do the same thing. That actually sounds good as a sine, so I'll leave it there. And again, I'm going to assign free LFOA to control the volume of the modulating oscillator, which in this case is oscillator D. And I'm going to try turning this down by 12 cents, or no, that doesn't sound good. So I'll turn it back up. Okay, and now I'm going to layer that in with the first oscillators. And that's good enough for this tutorial. You could repeat the same process with the last oscillator, but I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now. So from here, I route those to both filter A and filter B. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll set filter A to a 12 dB low pass and filter B to a comb. Alright, so now I'll turn the volume down on filter B for now, and I'll just mess with filter A. So I'll set my frequency up to about 3400 Hertz here. Give it some distortion and a little bit of resonance, or Q, whatever you call it. And then I'm going to set free LFOA to control filter A frequency, which is the cutoff. And I'm going to go ahead and turn oscillator E on a sine wave at 50%, and I'm going to route that through dry so that we have a nice sub bass underneath this. You won't hear it yet because I haven't messed with the dry volume. We'll get to it though. I'm just doing it now. So we've got things wobbling. We've got our filter going. So now we're going to mess with the comb filter here. So we'll turn it up a bit. And then we're going to mess with the comb. And that sounds good. Now you can route the LFO to the comb frequency, but what I've been doing is instead routing the free LFOA, in this case, to filter B's volume. And then you turn the volume down a bit. that gives us a nice high pitch harmonic to our sound. So then if we turn filter A back up, we have a nice, rich, very metallic sound. Now, what I was talking about with the oscillator E and the dry volume is by default muted. It's right here under the global tab. It took me a little while to figure that out. It's right under the global tab. It's at the bottom right hand corner here. So you can drag that up. And I think that, yeah, this is playing an octave higher than it should be. So we're going to drop this whole thing down an octave, and it'll sound a hell of a lot better. No, maybe not. So I wrote this bass line at a little higher pitch than normal, whatever. Anyway, with the dry volume, to get it wobbling, you just set the destination to general, and then you go down and you select dry volume, and then you also just set the source to free LFOA, and you drag the amount up. That way, your sub-bass undertone comes through without any distortion or any comb filtering or anything. It just comes through nice and clean. So, we have a bass patch, even though it's not really very bassy. Here, what I'll do is I'll just delete this bass line and we'll just make an even simpler one that's in the right pitch. Alright, so there's a nice deep. And it sounds like that comb filter needs to be turned down a bit in relation to the low pass. And I'm also going to set the LFO to control filter A's volume, just so that the wobble is nice and crisp. Okay, now what I do from here is I start to mess with different LFO rates. So what I do is I turn the sync off, and then you click and drag your speed LFO a bit. Alright, now on Fruity Loops 9 and above, so 10, which has just been released a few days ago, you click Tools and go Last Tweaked. Okay, to find that same option in 8 in previous versions, you click it right here. They move things around sometimes, don't ask why. So that's where, here's where you'll find it in versions 8 and before, and if you're using version 9 or above, it will be listed under Tools. So, you go Last Tweaked, and then you create Automation Clip. So we're going to clear off our screen, and we're going to bring our playlist over. So we have our playlist. We had the automation clip that we made, which is only 1 bar right now. And then if we take our bass line and draw it in here a couple times, we have 8 bars of bass. So we'll go ahead and extend this out to 8 bars, but usually that's what I would do. I would usually do an 8 bar pattern, maybe 16, but for this I'll just do a 4 bar to save time. And one of the nice things about FL10 is you can zoom all of this way. So you can zoom every single track equally with this, or you can zoom individual tracks So you can really get zoomed in on your automation clip and focus only on sorry about that. I think my mic crashed out for a second there. So you can have, your envelope really big, and you can have your baseline smaller above it so that you can see where your baseline hits are. And you can see all of them, because before, like if you zoomed in, you'd have both of your tracks like this, and you'd only see the really low bass notes. You wouldn't get to see the treble ones. And it was kind of a hassle, but now that problem is solved. So what you do is you just look at where your bass hits are, and you just start drawing different things. And the reason I turn the LFO sync off is because in Blue, the way they line up the tracks, like 1/16 star, 1/16, 1/16 triplet, and then it goes to 1/32 star, which is actually slower than 1/16 triplet. When you start drawing these nice smooth up and down fades, your bass line actually doesn't slow down smooth. It jumps around because of those weird changes in, the tempo. Well, not the tempo, but the between, those different ratios. So I find keeping away from the LFO sync is a better way to go if you're going to draw an envelope to modulate your rate. And that got a bit technical sounding, but it's kind of the only way I know how to say it. So we'll go ahead and just draw some random shit in here and see what it sounds like. Probably will sound horrible. Well, you need to make sure you're in song mode at this point. So we should turn our click track on and perfect that. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not really going to do that. I'll just click and drag around some more and make some pretty... just some really weird stuff. Alright. So let's say that's our 8 bar or 16 bar bass line, whatever you choose to do. And now it's time to get into the mixer. So I've got my microphone on mixer track 1, so ignore that. I've got my bass on channel 2 here. Alright, so you can EQ it and distort it here if you'd like, but the way I prefer to do it is, you see I have these tracks over here, B in, and then 5 steps over, B out, and in between it you see sub, mid, treble, and M and T main, which is mid and treble main, and then bass out. So what we're gonna do is click off the bass routed to the master. We're gonna mess with the mixer routing basically. So we're gonna take our bass channel and we're gonna take it off of the master and we're gonna send it to the bass in. Then we're gonna take the bass in and we're gonna split it to sub, mid, and treble, but we're not going to send it to the master, okay? And then the sub, we're going to route bass out and not the master. Mid, we're going to route to mid and treble main and not the master. Do the same thing with treble, it goes to mid and treble main and not the master. And then of course the mid and treble main then goes to the bass out. Now the reason I throw this fourth channel, the mid and treble main, into the mix is it allows me to drop out both the mid and treble using a single plugin, like Fruity Balance for example. So instead of having to have a Fruity Balance on both my mid and my treble channels, even if they were both being controlled by the same automation clip, there's 2 instances of that VST loaded for no reason. This also allows me to mesh my mid and trebles back together after I've done some multi-band effectsing. So what we've just done is now if we play our bass right now, it'll sound the same, but it'll be 3 or 4 times louder now that we've split it, and we haven't actually gotten the frequencies on those channels separated yet. So we're going to click through all of them. We're going to add a fruity multiband compressor to all of those channels. Now I'm only going to load it on my sub channel for the sake of this tutorial, but the principle remains for all of your tracks, channels, whatever. So for the sub bass, we're going to go ahead and mute the mid and treble, and we're going to play our bass line. And you're going to think, well, why does the mid and treble come through? Well, they come through because you see on the multi-band compressor, you have 3 bands. You have your low band, mid band, and high band. We're going to click this M on the mid and high bands, which mutes it. The little button there, when you click it, it's red. Alright, then what we're going to do is on our low band, we're going to turn our threshold all the way up and the ratio down so that it's not acting like a compressor. It's just acting like an EQ. But the reason you want to use this multi-band compressor instead of a parametric EQ is that this uses a linear EQ, which is what you want when you're splitting frequencies. So you may not necessarily have to use the fruity EQ, or fruity multi-band compressor, but you'll want to use something that has a linear EQ to do this. So for the subband, this is the knob that you'll mess with to set the frequency where it'll say everything below that is going to go through the low band mixer channel here instead of the mid or high band channel. So we're going to play this back, and then we're going to mess with this knob until we get a nice sub bass only sound. Alright, so I've got mine at about 125 hertz. Now what you would do is if you were doing this for all of your mixer tracks, for your mid channel, what you would do is you would mute your low band, activate your mid band with this button, and then mute your high band. And then you would set your low frequency to whatever you determined your bass was, and then you would set your high band to whatever you determined your treble. So what I do is I set my sub bass first, and then I set my treble, which is my high band. Which usually ends up being around, 2035 hertz, 2120, which is 2K, by the way, 2120 hertz. I'm just saying it a little weird, I suppose. So it usually ends up being around, 20 hertz, kilohertz, sorry. And again, you want to make sure that it's not acting like a compressor unless you want to compress that particular band. And once you've set your low band and your high band, your mid band is obviously whatever is left over. Now when you're doing this, if I just turn on my mid band real quick, you'll notice that it snaps like that. So you'll want to line these up between your different mixer tracks, because each of these compressors is on a different mixer track. Like your sub bass has its own, your mid band has its own, the treble has its own. The mid and treble together would be both the mid band and high band on and set appropriately for your bass sound. And then from here, once you've got your bass separated out, you can then, in your mixer, you can put a distortion on your mid band that won't affect your high band because it's not on that band. And then you could put, a bass boost on your sub, or a reverb on your treble, or a delay on your treble but not on your mids, and then you can mute your trebles, or you could mute your mids, or you could mute both of them, or you can do whatever you want. And it's really cool, and it's a really easy way to get some really crazy fucking sounds. So I hope you enjoyed this. That's really all I've got for you. So this is RedRaven, peacing out.